We're back, baby. Horns up, talking Texas podcast. Fisher DeSopolis, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Kreider, the Quan Cosby. Those listening on ESPN 102.7 Austin. What up? We've unfortunately but officially entered the off season for football. Before we get into anything, I got to tell you guys, we are now brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Very exciting. Underdog Fantasy is available in 30 states. Super simple, fun fantasy app. Sign up. Use the code STRIPE, capital STRIPE, all caps. Get a bonus pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Really fun. Go check it out. We've had a good time over there. And it's one of the games, you're playing higher or lower on fantasy points for players, and that's going into the NFL divisional round. So sign up, use the code, get on Underdog Fantasy, play the game, win money, win big. Very exciting stuff. Some other very exciting news, and I think I want to pose it to you guys and see if you feel the same as I do. Bittersweet for a lot of fans. We've had a boatload of players declare, as was the case last year. And we'll get into the Ohio State game. We'll get into our overall thoughts of the season. But the biggest news of the day as we're recording is Quinn Ewers, our QB1 the past couple seasons, is heading to the NFL draft, forgoing another year in college. It's obviously arch time for the Texas Longhorns, and he's not going to take an NIL deal and go to Notre Dame, Ohio State, or Oregon, and he's going to go test the waters and test his luck in the NFL and in the NFL draft. And as an overarching theme, I'm really excited about all the guys we're sending to the pros. Yes, we're going to miss a ton of these players. Yes, we've fallen in love with a ton of these guys. But this group of guys, along with last year's, are really the group of guys that have helped set our program up for future success. I'll never forget it when you brought Derek Johnson on, Quan. He was talking about his group of guys. And we asked him if he resented or felt bad that the year after he left, y'all won. And he laughed off the question and said how excited he was and how happy he was. Although he didn't get a ring and play in that game, he really felt like he was a part of that success and really felt that he helped get the program to this point where they could win the national championship. And I feel that way, and I'm sure you guys do, and we'll get your thoughts about these guys. And yes, we'll miss our offensive linemen. We're losing 4 of the 5 as of now. We'll miss Blue. We'll miss Trey Moore, who had a really good season with us. Barron Sorrell, who came on strong. Makuba, who was a really good player this year for us. Matthew Golden, who, Nick, you from the jump was beating the drum that this is your guy. This is a pro. This guy has to go in the NFL draft. He was being labeled as a 5th-round pick. Some amazing play at the end of the year. And one of maybe the best catch in Texas of the season, without a doubt, I would actually say, in that Ohio State game to start it off. And he's now looking like a 2nd-round pick and has raised his stock. Isaiah Bond going to the draft. It's sad. We'll miss these guys. We could obviously use a lot of the guys that weren't seniors who had the option to come back. But for me, I feel for where our program is, this is so awesome. This is such a huge accomplishment that we're able to send all these guys not only to the draft, but we're looking at, once again at a bunch of players that could be 1st-round picks.
Well, to add to that, we had 11 players last year that got drafted, which was a Texas record. I think we're going to break that record this year because more than 11 guys have declared, and all of them, for the most part, look like they're guys that can be drafted in a 7-round format. You mentioned all the offensive linemen that are going. I think all those guys get drafted. I'm predicting that Campbell is probably going to end up staying the way that it's kind of shaking out, because I feel like you do need at least one guy there that has that experience, and he can take the reins and be the leader of that offensive line, and I think improve his draft stock a little bit too. But yeah, it's going to be really exciting to see what happens to these guys. I mean, Q, I'm sure when guys were coming into college, like they're considering looking at who puts out the most pros. And over the last couple of years, like this is such a big recruiting technique for Sark to utilize, saying that over the last 2 years, we've put over 20 guys in the league, from the draft, and not to mention the undrafted free agents. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, man, it's so many layers to this now because it's changed so much. When you think about Golden being there for a year, I think the weird kind of panic from Texas fans is we can have him longer. We want more of him. But the reality is it's just not how it works anymore.
Yeah.
When X and Jay Witt and the guy that left last year, Mitchell, everybody's like, oh, how dare, we're never going to be able to replace that. And, we had some guys come back and have every bit of as productive year. So it's the weird kind of new norm, and I appreciate Sark and their staff because I think they're 10 days ahead of it. Ultimately, I think it's also why that Sark talked a lot about complementary football, but complementary recruiting, in my opinion, may be more important than complementary football because you're going to lose guys. You need to go in the portal and you need to have a top 5 class. We had the number 1 class last year, so we fill some voids from that perspective, and we still these guys leaving are opening up other scholarships for people in the portal. And Austin is still one of the best freaking cities on the planet. So I just feel like in the new era of what we're dealing with, we're in a really, really now again, we have stuff to kind of do better, probably in the NIL world from what I hear behind the scenes, but it's super important. And to take it to another level on the NFL piece of it, that's what you're going to ball for. That's especially at the Blue Bloods. You have the expectation of going to the next level. And we had those weird years where I mean, again, like I said before, I think there's north of 50. I think it was like 58. That seems like so many, but it was. When I went to the league and I was there for my little stint, there was 58 Longhorns, way more than Alabama and all them. Now they've caught up. Florida State's caught up. Georgia's caught up. Ohio State's been there. Those guys, but really, it's what it's about. You will not go in a lot. You will not go in a football facilities in any Power Five and there not be an NFL wall. And they're just because it means that much. And that's the same thing in basketball. We're now in the basketball season. You'll see the same thing in every single sport, Olympics and those sports. So kudos to Sark and their crew because I'm with y'all. There's gonna be a lot of these guys drafted. The interesting conversation too is if they're drafted higher or lower, because ultimately what they're getting paid in college, if you get drafted after the 3rd round, you lost money. I mean, especially if you're on these levels. If you're going to get drafted and you go 5th, 6th round and you had another year, per the numbers I've now kind of caught up on and the NIL stuff I'm learning about, you may have lost money. So it's the fun thing about all we're talking about is it is literally changing every single day. But the best thing is we've now gone to 2 Final Fours in a row, the only team to do it. And we're in a really good spot with recruiting, with the portal, working to get even better on the NIL stint. And I like where we are.
Yeah, I also think that this year it seems like we're not as active as we were last year in the transfer portal. If you're looking at like the rankings, the top 50, top 100 guys, it's been pretty quiet on our front. We've only added 4 transfer portal guys, 3 of them being defense, and then one of them being a punter. Which that's always nice to have. I wouldn't mind adding a kicker too. I think there's a guy that's coming in that might be there too. But I think a lot of that also comes down to Sark finally trusting his recruiting classes because the 2 previous years, he still had guys rolling over from the previous era, from the Tom Herman era. And now this entire team has been recruited by Sark. There's no one left from that era. So I think he's starting to finally trust that. And ultimately, we did such a great job last year of recruiting and this year of recruiting, with the freshmen that were in the building and the underclassmen, that I think these guys are going to really get a chance to shine. And it's not so much of a necessity than it was before. I mean, obviously that template worked really well, having AD Mitchell come in for 1 year and ball out, having Bond come out for 1 year, even though it was a little bit underwhelming, and then Golden, like it's a good template, but I'm excited to see the guys who have stuck with the program from day one, the Ryan Wingos, the DeAndre Moores, for all those guys to eat,
Isn't it hilarious?
And I'll tell you too, it's a blessing and a curse for us. I don't think we've been as active in the portal, and I remember we had the same situation last year where you make it to the Final Four.
Yeah, can quickly just the portal rankings right now. Only one team that was in of the 12 teams in the college football playoff is in that top 10.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
They're number 10, right? So
they're sitting at home.
Yeah.
They're sitting at home. They're already knee deep in the portal trying to get a head start, as they should be. But I remember we're in the same boat last year, and when our season was finally over, then you start seeing it hit. And so I think that's going to be the same case. There's so many layers of resources and things that we have that's attractive, but none other than continuing to be in the mix, going to the SEC championship. We didn't win it, but getting there, winning the Big 12, all those things it's almost like the Cowboys right now. Everybody's like, who are you going to pick? Well, if there's a coach they're considering that's, still playing, they can't interview. They're kind of in those same spots of you have to kind of wait until things play out. But very similar to the Cowboys, although I think this is changing a little bit. Not that we want to go NFL. Playing for, let me see, Jerry Jones being your boss versus coming to a University of Texas with Sark and what they have going. I think that's even more attractive than going to be a coach for the Cowboys. So I think now that it's done, we'll get through the next week. National championship will happen, and then I know they're already hard at work, and we'll start seeing some of those gaps being filled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do think the Cowboys' point is interesting. Right now, obviously, there's a head coaching availability, and people are talking about this job in a way that they haven't talked about the Cowboys' head coaching job in some time. That it might not be the most appealing position, open vacancy for a head coach,
No,
and
it's
and
not.
it didn't used to be the case, and so I think that's a good correlation with where we are in Texas football. If you get to the Final Four, every back-to-back years, you're winning the recruiting battle, and you are the University of Texas with our endowment, our university, everything that Austin has to offer. That is a recipe for sustained success. And so that's what we've got right now. And you're absolutely right, Quan, about I mean, you look at our recruits for this upcoming year. We're the number one class, yes. But what we've already done in the portal from a defensive line standpoint, how we recruited, bringing in a bunch of freshmen who are going to have an opportunity to win a job in camp. We're losing a lot of that defensive line depth, some of it to the portal, some of it to the draft. But I think we're going to be able to replace it pretty well. The offensive line is a little bit of a different question. But you didn't mention, Josh, that we have Baker, who's waiting in the wings, who is a five-star recruit, right? Gooseby, who already has started games. I mean, I think the most impressive thing for us is I'm looking at Taft coming back, and that reminds me a lot of Vern Broughton staying, right? Of Jahdae Barron staying and Alfred Collins staying and what they did in really recreating how NFL scouts looked at them as a player. Do I think Taft could have gotten drafted? Yes. Do I think he has an opportunity to lead our team defensively as a safety next year and be a top 3-round pick? Potentially. Like we saw what Jahdae did raising his stock. But now we've got Jelani McDonald, who going into next season will have played 3 seasons of college football. And that is the difference maker. I mean, he's already played in playoff football, and he has 2 years more of eligibility. By the time he's our leader, if he stays for all 4 years, like we're just putting ourselves in a position to replicate the success that we had this year. And I think that's the beautiful thing. And the guys that are buying in are really buying in. And that's why I don't think, we're seeing some guys leave, but we're seeing just as many guys stay. We're not having as many guys enter the portal as some of these other quote unquote blue blood schools.
And to your point too, and this kind of ties into what Derek Johnson was saying, Josh, I think a lot of these guys have passed down the reins and have probably passed down a lot of knowledge and have been able to not coach, but give advice and just give tips and tools to some of these young guys. I mean, it's nice to see all these guys go to the league like Jahdae and Makuba, but I'm just as excited to see who fills the shoes, right? Because like Xavier Filsaime, guy who flipped from Florida, last minute coming over to Texas. You already mentioned McDonald. Like we've got so many guys waiting in the wings that could just immediately plug and play and replace this type of productivity.
Yeah,
and we have the best of both worlds. We have that, but we also do have the Taft daddies staying a little bit longer. Like you said, I feel like Campbell, if he's waiting this long, he's having real thoughts about it. In my opinion, if you have the option, you can be the top dog. And if you have to think this long about going to the league or not, you probably shouldn't.
Right.
And I mean that in a nice way. I'm just saying, if you're not, if it's a no-brainer, which I don't know that everybody who's declared it is a no-brainer. I think some guys have, for whatever reason, they had a okay year, maybe some injuries and stuff like that. But you know what? They're ready to go. They're ready to quit going to school. And the kids these days, hell, they get to school with freshman year done. So they take 2 or 3 years and they have the degree, which is super important in my opinion. And the things that I think NIL will help. But man, it's and last but not least, the one negative piece of it is the numbers we hear in NIL just aren't real.
Right. And if they are real, they're only real for a few people.
Yeah,
right?
for a few people. I mean, it's no
Beck,
different than NFL. You hear about these massive guaranteed contracts in the league, and I'm like, bro, take off the quarterbacks and then look at that again. Then you start getting a couple of D linemen here, offensive linemen, but essentially out of the 32 teams and 55 people on the roster, it's 15% or less that have these mega. I was like, NFL's a thousandaire league, not a millionaire league. That's basketball and baseball, and so it just I get it on every level. Really I'm empathetic to why anyone makes certain decisions, but I appreciate the guys who were here 1 year or 6. Kudos to the year they had because they balled out.